Welcome to Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockerell. Lessons in leadership, management, and customer service. You can create magic too. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and as you expect, in every episode, I'm here with Lee Cockerell, the retired Executive Vice President of Walt Disney World. Lee, it's great to see you again.
Yes, sir. Wednesday's my favorite day.
Mine too. Lee and I always have a set appointment that we record, take care of business, do things on Wednesday. Yeah, we might talk other times throughout the week, but we have a standing appointment on Wednesday that I always look forward to. It makes for a great day. Now, Tuesday's the day the show that comes out. Wednesday's the day that Lee and I talk. And before we get into the episode, let me mention our friends at Magical Vacation Planner, because every time Lee and I talk, of course we talk about them because they do such a great job. You can call them at 407-442-2694. One of the great things, if you use Magical Vacation Planner, it doesn't cost you anything. As an example, you book at Disney, you book at Universal. That's already built into the cost. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Well, something significant is going to happen this episode. I think this is true to say. With Tim Dyck joining us again, he becomes only the third person who has been on the show more than one time.
No way.
I think he joins Donald Miller. Oh, this isn't true. Donald Miller, Bob Berg, Lou Mangello, and now Tim Dyck. What a lineup, Tim.
That is high company to keep. Holy smokes.
Yes. Well, the reason we are having Tim back is every so often we do an episode about anxiety in the workplace because we get questions about it. It all stems from 2016. It's amazingly that it was 10 years ago. We did that episode to tell people what you were going through with anxiety and depression. The most listened to episode we've ever done, the most feedback we've ever gotten from a single episode, and the topic continues to come up every year. Well, we did one on anxiety in the workplace based on a listener question, and Tim Dyck reached out and said, hey, I would be willing to come on the show and talk about anxiety. I've gone through some stuff. It impacted my personal life. It impacted my home life. I'd be willing to talk about it. And since Tim was coming on the show to talk about hiring, we said, well, let's do a second one and talk anxiety as well. So, Lee, we have found that whether people say it or not, this topic of anxiety, it gets almost all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah, let me tell you, I had a psychologist look at me one day. I met her out at Disney, and she said, how you doing, Lee? And I said, oh, I'm doing great. And she said, no, I mean really. And I said, yeah, and that's true. I mean really. Are you really doing great? Well, we know that we all suffer from this problem, and I'm glad Tim's going to talk about it because I've been through it. And I said it starts with the problem. It leads to you can't sleep, and then you get anxiety. And in my case, I got into depression, had to get treated by a psychiatrist so Priscilla wouldn't get rid of me. And then I had to get back to sanity, and it took a while. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how to deal with it now and to recognize it and not put up with it, because it's usually something caused by something I did or don't do. So it's a good subject. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking here before we started recording, and Lee said, Jody, do you have anxiety? And I said, yeah, all the time. And Lee's response was, it's your fault, which he was joking, but there's a lot of truth to that. We bring a lot of it on ourselves. Now, Tim Dyck, founder of Best Culture Solutions, welcome back to the show. And
Thank you.
Second, I think you're a good fit for this, having dealt with anxiety yourself, but also helping organizations hire and build cultures, build best cultures, hence the name of the company. So I think this is something you can talk about on a personal level, which we do want to hear whatever you are willing to share, followed by how does anxiety affect the workplace? So start with yourself and then move into the workplace.
Yeah, wow, great question. But the first thing I would say is Lee said, I can't remember exactly how you put it, Lee, but you mentioned something about recognizing it. And I think that is where a lot of people struggle. A lot of people, they just chalk it up that life is stressful and that's just the way it is. And to be fair, life is stressful, right? We talk a lot about doing the hard things when you need to do them, and doing that can create anxiety. And having to do that can create anxiety. And a lot of people just chalk it up to that. Well, that's just kind of life. And it is, but it doesn't mean it's not a condition or something that you don't recognize or you. And because of that, a lot of people just kind of explain it away, right? And they don't fully deal with it. They don't fully recognize it. And I can tell you that I don't mind sharing. I am 43 right now, and probably for a lot of my life, just because it was what I had. Of course, I'm worried about things. Of course, am taking that on. To me, it was just part of life. It was just part of life. And it is, but it doesn't mean that you need to let it control you or let it dominate things as much as it did. And so with everything, for me, I found that I was struggling a lot with areas of, being a business owner. That's a lot of responsibility as you get it off the ground. Also, I have three little girls that are 7, 5, and 2, and they take a lot of energy, especially my middle one, because she's kind of like a feral cat sometimes, but she has a lot of energy. And so I found there were days where, yeah, you worry about things, but I would get up in the morning and really worry about things, and I couldn't enjoy anything about a year and a bit ago. It was just constant, and it was more than just worries in the back of your mind. And I know so many people who would have that happen and say, hey, look, that's just part of life. You just got to get through it, and put up with it and all that type of stuff. But like Lee said, if you have anxiety like that in your life, it's your fault. And people need to wake up a little bit and realize, no, you can do something about this. And you should put your hand up and you should seek help and treatment, because a lot of times it is really well and truly a medical condition where the things that are going around your brain and your body are not regulated, the chemicals and stuff like that. It truly is a medical thing when you're experiencing that. And so many people I find are they either explain it away because that's what they think it is, or they don't want to deal with it, or they avoid it. And you absolutely must address it. You need to address it. You're relying on it. Your family's relying on it. Your business partners are relying on it. You have to get it addressed for your own sanity and ability to do things. But going into, say, the business world, right, here's where it gets dangerous. So many people now are under immense pressure. And I would say that I think that, a lot of things that have changed in our world in the last 20, 30 years have only added to that. It used to be that I had three ways to get a hold of you. I could either mail you, I could see you, or I could pick up a telephone. And now I can email you, I can mail you, I can see you, I can call you, I can text you, I can, all of these things. And it's giving people overwhelm. There's so many things coming at us now. And the human mind is wired to think, if I don't address all these things like that, then and not to mention, I mean, yes, you should address things in a timely fashion, don't get me wrong. But with all these things coming at us, it's hard for us to keep it organized, and it just creates anxiety for us. And I think that, along with greater awareness around anxiety and mental health, I think more and more people are experiencing it or recognizing and getting it. But if you don't, and you're going into your career, or you're a leader, or you're somebody that people are relying on in the professional space, it could have a lot of ramifications as well. You don't make good decisions. You make decisions out of fear. You avoid, anxiety leads you to avoid having the tough conversations you need to have. And that's both personal and business. And I think, with so much coming at us these days, one benefit of more things coming at us is more information on how to treat anxiety and how to manage and deal with it. Everybody, you owe it to yourself to go take a look and be self-aware and make sure that you're proactively addressing it, because it definitely has spill over in the workplace and your family.
Well, and it at every level. I mean, that from grade school kids to junior high, high school, college. 40% of college students apparently need coaching, mental health counseling when they come to school. It's a big change. They're worried about grades, graduating, finances. Is their dad going to lose their job? Can they pay for it? I mean, You think about how cumulative it is. You're 6 years old and you're just having fun. Next thing you know, you make a decision to have a girlfriend, and then that creates a little anxiety along the way. And then you get married, a little more there. That you're adding responsibility at a pretty good pace at some point. And then you have children, and then you've got a mother-in-law, and then you've got a boss and a job, and your wife wants you at the soccer game and pick up the pizza and help do the laundry, and yeah, I mean, and that's what happens. It's overwhelming, and I think you are exactly right, Tim. Of now the internet and our phones have created even more coming at it, and learning how to discipline yourself about that. And it's really important because it's an accumulation. Although you would think that a young college student wouldn't have that, but everybody, I mean, society puts a lot of expectations on us today, and everybody's thinking, oh, I don't know, and we don't know how you were damaged in your early life. I was talking to not talking to a lady, but I read about a lady the other day. She said she was going to a top-notch school, and she felt insecure. She felt like everybody was smarter than her, and she was going to prove that she could graduate from there. And she said the reason it's always haunted her. In fifth grade, another girl told her she was stupid, and she said she's never that's stuck in her brain. And you just don't know what's stuck up there, and it is chemical. It's absolutely a chemical reaction to. So don't take it as just a passing thing. I think, and I'm glad you're thinking about that, working about it, because like any big problem, you've got to stop and deal with it. You can't just hope it goes away. It doesn't. Hope is a nice concept, but it doesn't work that well. You could hope, pray, or wish. Wishing, that's kind of not that effective either. But getting psychological counseling, seeing a psychiatrist, psychologist, thinking about your lifestyle, and yeah, it can be cured, but you got to commit to it, or it'll take you down. It will get worse and worse and worse. And so, good subject, and I think if you're thinking about that all the time, you're probably going to give people advice on how to think about it. I mean, that could be a new part of your business. Is okay, hiring the right people, but what else do they need besides a job? And when we go to, hopefully you get a boss that's sensitive to paying attention. I talked to a girl in a class out at UCF one day and about this. I talked to the class, and we talked about depression. I was kind of going through it at that point. She called me later and said, "Thank you for talking about that." She said, "I was so lucky. My professor was paying attention, and he noticed how something had changed in me." And I think, yeah, pay attention. And it can be anybody around you, it can be your family, your parents as they get older, your grandparents. It's real. And I think a lot of times it's going on right in our face, and we don't even know it because everybody covers up. When I ask you how you're doing great. I said it's the biggest lie in America. So we all need to talk about it more and be available to help people with it more.
Yeah. It's so one thing too that is so great is people see leaders talking about it, right? People that they see that have had professional success or success elsewhere. And I should clarify, I don't think that leadership means that you have a position. It's leadership is how you're being, period. But in this case, I mean, people that have had a high level of success, I think it's important that they talk about it like you have, because a lot of people, they don't realize that successful people are people too. And they think that a lot of times successful people must have had no obstacles in their way, or they never had to deal with this, or they never had to deal with that. And so because of that, they either think that they can never be successful, they never deal with it, or right, because they're afraid to admit it, because successful people don't have this problem. And I think it's just very important that anything where people see others that have been successful and they can see the humanity in them, right? It's important. And if you're a business leader, it's important as well that you're proactively addressing these things. And even if you don't have crippling anxiety, we all have things that we can do to work on our own mental health, regardless. And people need to see you doing that, so that way they do it too. And it has an effect on your bottom line, and it has an effect on your operational success when it's not addressed. And so it's very helpful, I think, to see, you know, people seeing other people that just might have a different spot on the org chart, you know, coming out as normal people with these are normal problems, and we all can address them. And the best thing to do is to take ownership of them.
Yeah, for all of us to pay attention. When something changes or an attitude changes or coming late to work or being out all the time or getting angry very rapidly, and you see that at home or work, I mean, yeah, and every boss I've had, I thought was mentally ill. So I don't, maybe it was me because I didn't like feedback very well. But I'm trying to get over that. But it's true. I think we're all a little mentally ill, and society's ramping it up. So it's fear.
Lee,
It's fear.
Totally.
One thing you have said in the past, Lee, on an episode of this show that I think is so impactful, every leader should hear it, or coworker, or family member. If someone changes, something changed. And you touched on it now. Like, people don't just start being late for work for no reason. People don't start getting angry really quick for no reason. It means something has changed. So, Tim, with the idea of building great cultures, talk about the importance of a leader, a manager, to be in tune enough with people to know to actually notice that something has changed. Lee gave the example, a professor was in tune enough with a student that he spoke up when he noticed something changed. I don't think that happens quite enough in the workplace.
No, and it goes back, and we mentioned this the last episode we recorded too. People are afraid to give feedback or address issues that are in front of them because you're afraid of being unaccepted or wrong by the person that you give it to. But the reality is that, this is not just you giving them feedback that might help their job performance. You might be saving their life. And how many jobs are safety sensitive in some way, right? And if people are struggling and they cannot mentally focus on the task before them, and they're in a safety sensitive job and you did nothing, that could happen. And I have been in those situations. I have been in situations where people struggled with mental health and addictions and nobody did anything, and had to step in and address it because we weren't helping that person. And every day that we did not address it and we didn't notice it, you put that person at risk again. And it's ultimately each person's individual responsibility to notice these things in themselves and overcome it and do things about it. Sometimes people just need to point it out to them too. And it's also your responsibility, if you're a leader on an organizational chart somewhere, to make sure that you're not knowingly putting people in the line of fire. And this goes with that. There's more to protecting people from the line of fire than just directly telling them to do something silly or unsafe. It's also observing the behaviors. And so you need to know your people. And I think, to answer your original question, that's the value, right? That's why you need to know your people and how they might be reacting to things or noticing differences in their behavior and stuff like that. Because I have had, employees, team members that were struggling with addiction, and that did not come out until that question was asked and we were able to get them the proper help, and stuff like that. And you don't know. And sometimes it's not even just a workplace incident. Something might happen at home, and you need to have the courage to have that conversation. But you also need to do the work to build that trust, and you need to do the work to learn about those people. And that's where, Lee, in creating magic, you talk a lot about asking people every day if there's anything you can help them with. That type of thing builds trust. I remember I read that in the book, and I started doing it, and people looked at me like, "What do you mean you're asking me if you can help me?" And they'd never been asked that before. They didn't know what to do. Or what do you mean you want my opinion on what to do? Well, it's because we pay you for your opinion. But those types of things where you're actually looking to get to know them and how they think, even if it's in the workplace, helps you get to know them as people as well. And it builds that trust. That way you can actually see those differences in behavior as well. And you can observe them. And then you can help support them and have those conversations that you need to have.
And by the way, it's going on around you every day, in families, in business, in strangers. I can guarantee you. They say you walk by 100 people a day, probably 50% of them are struggling, or maybe more actually. And now with layoffs and jobs and college costs, and I mean it's endless. Inflation, um, yeah, I mean, so it's real, and don't believe anybody who tells you they're fine. Like somebody said, when you ask your daughter how's she doing, she says fine. That's the wrong answer. You got to go deeper and stay close. And I told somebody once, we hear so often that a parent will say, "I didn't see it coming." You know, I didn't know my son was building a bomb in his room or had guns. And I said, well, kids, you better go in the room every 20 minutes and see what they're up to because they have zero judgment. And this whole internet has really made people all want to be famous and proud, and I'm strong, and I'm more beautiful, and I mean, the pressure and the pride factor is out of control. So I would think everybody listening today, listen to Tim and just go to work tomorrow and look around. Just quietly look at each person. Is there something going on here that you need to help with? And yeah, every time I ask my wife, do you need anything? She always does. So,
Lee, I have one more question for you. And I think anxiety, probably most of the anxiety we deal with is that we have trouble dealing with stress. But you have also said in the past that stress is actually good for us. It's distress that causes anxiety. So give us some ideas on how do we deal with stress and distress, or deal with stress to make sure it doesn't become distress and then cause anxiety.
absolutely. And I'll tell you, distress is when your life gets out of control. One thing after another, and I'm sure we've all had those. First it's this, and then it's that, and then something else. And the best way, and that's why when I was teaching time management, having a system that you keep your life under control. So you're spending enough time with relationship to make sure you're connected. You're making sure that you're learning more so your job performance continues to be good. You are seeing your doctor. You're exercising. If you How do you keep your life under control? First, you have to know what you're not happy with, what's bothering you, and if it's affecting your sleep or your attitude or your personality, there's something wrong. And you got to figure out, what do I need to do to make this go away? And so many people have so much coming at them, they're not organized, and they hope things get better, and life just explodes. And the worse things get, the worse they get, because your ability to handle stress as it gets worse and worse, you get to where you just want to sit on the couch and do nothing. And that's really when depression sets in. And so if your life's out of control, if it's your boyfriend, get a new boyfriend. If it's your job, get a new boss. I mean, but don't let this get worse, because it's kind of safe for now, but long term it plays out and it becomes it's an evil thing, and it makes long term you won't survive it unless you deal with it. And and I was the worst at that. I used to let things go because I'm a nice guy and I didn't want to get rid of them, and I didn't want to have the hard talk, and I didn't want to give my opinion because I was afraid of my bosses, and I didn't even know what leadership had. So I would say the first 20 years of my career, I screwed up a lot until I got insight. I think the time management helped me the most with insight about most of my problems are my fault because I'm not dealing with them. And that to me was the eye opener. So You got to open your eyes.
Well, I think this has been a very important topic to talk about. And I do think Tim and his team at Best Culture Solutions can actually help. If you're concerned about stress, distress, anxiety in the workplace, well, Tim's company helps create good culture. So, Tim, if someone wants to talk about this, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for help asking. And I would also say that just to put it back, both you and Lee are also great resources on this, because I wouldn't be self-aware of it if it wasn't for that episode 10 years ago. But no, and that's why more people just need to talk about it. But, we do help leaders navigate things like this, and we can happily help leaders be open and honest up in front with their people, and come up with strategies around this for their people, and help you navigate it. But we are at bestculturesolutions.com or .ca, and my email address is tim@bestculturesolutions.com or .ca, depending on what country you're in.
All right. Well, reach out to either one of us. Lee's at leecockerell.com. I'm at jodymayberry.com. Tim already told you how to reach out, and if you need help with any of this, just reach out. I mean, you will be surprised if you talk about it, how much people are willing to help. Until next week, go out and create magic for others.